Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach Nuff channel. In this video we are looking at the NRL SuperCoach stock market as we get into round 21 of the 2023 season. So very much on the run home now. The last sort of big buy round with three teams last week on buy has gone through. So from here on in we still have one team on a buy each week, but that should definitely make it more manageable. I guess the other thing to consider as well coming up is the head-to-head finals. So if you're a head-to-head player in particular, or your overall season's pretty shot and you want to try to make something out of it, I guess there's some interesting moves to be made at this point. And so I guess because we are through the buys and we're into the home run, we'll probably focus just more on those sort of keeper, like build your final team type options. So this will probably go a bit quicker after the lengthy introduction. But, for example, you can see we've got the hookers down to a single page now. So at the top of the hookers list this week, we've got Harrison Graham from the Dolphins. So I think as far as the bottom dollar cheapies that ended up playing last week, his 52 was the best. So if you went with him as that bottom dollar price player that was playing, well done to you. He still has a nice break even of 27, average of 46, but he's on the bye this week, and then perhaps Marshall King will be back next week. Um, it's a bit hard to say with Marshall King's injury where that all sits, but I guess given there's not really any other options around that price, you may be stuck with him unless you can, find a way to make a bit of money and go up from there. Excuse me. Next up on the list, we've got Brendan Hands from the Eels. So 76 on the weekend. It was also confirmed last week that Josh Hodgson is out for the season. So that spot is essentially Hands for the rest of the year. So I think, if you are really struggling with a tight budget, as you can see from the picture there, it's not the worst option. I think, we want the upside that some of the other options have, but obviously they do cost us more money. So just throwing it out there as an option for those that might be a bit lacking. Tanner Boyd, so we did have him on the chopping block last week, but he made us look a bit silly with the 93. So his average isn't that far behind some of the other pod options. He also has DPP, but that is with halfback, so it's probably not the easiest to finagle and manoeuvre around. But again, if you're sort of scraping pennies, it's a possible option in that sub 500k price range. Wade Egan, so 66 on the weekend, despite Frankie Lussick lurking on the bench. His season average of just under 60 means he's a nice point of difference option. Obviously, he does have a bye coming up next week, which is also something to consider. Reed Marnie, so 64 on the weekend. So he's ticking along nicely. Could be a bit of a bloodbath this week against the Panthers, and without Sexton, I'm a bit worried about their attack, and then obviously their defence has been a massive issue this season. But as long as Marnie gets a bit of support through the middle, he'll make his tackles and do a little bit in attack. So viable pot option. And I guess probably my preferred pot option, but there could be that dog's bias as well. Harry Grant rested last week. No, it's not true. He played last week. I don't know what's happened there. It's 90 odd. Got a try. He's a gun. So I think he out of all the hookers, he's the number one target. If you don't have him, he hasn't got a bye for the rest of the season, and obviously he has that upside of being able to score, and is playing in a team that's going pretty well. Reece Robson, so 46 on the weekend, perhaps a bit flat post Origin. So again, a viable pot option, does have a buy coming up though, so we need to keep that in mind. Brayley, so 41, again, not a lot of attack for the Sharks. Limited his upside there. I guess a bit of a pot option in that he doesn't have any buys left, but And saying that, if you've already got Grant, I'd have any of those other pod options over him. Um, I think the Sharks are flat track bullies, and they've got a bit of a tough run home, so probably give Brayley a miss. Cody Nikorima, so 93 on the weekend, so seems to be playing well in the fullback slot. So if you're that way inclined, you could have him as a bit of a left field pod for the run home. Because they seem to be pretty happy with Hammer on the edge. Defending seems to be the reason why they've got him out there. Happy Coruscant, so uh, I guess a real bargain option when we consider what he is capable of. Interestingly, they do still have De Silva on the bench, so perhaps not playing the full 80. Um, may still be just getting back into gear post injury, so you can wait a bit. But I guess also if you want to go with him as your second hooker option, could work out nicely. Damien Cook. Oh, so I think I've got him and Grant mixed up. Yeah, because Grant got 95. Cook didn't play on the weekend. So that's probably where the errors come in. Apologies for that. But and I think the season averages are the same as well. Maybe I've got them completely wrong there. Although I think Cook's break even is correct. So if you flip the Grant and Cook numbers around, except for the break even, um, Cook's a gun. So if you want to bring him in, that's fine. I think you can wait a week. And his price will dip a bit, and then you can get him at about 600k or thereabout. And Jerry Marshall King, so on the bye this week. Hopefully he comes back from his shoulder injury next week. But even then, with his high break even, if you've been holding him this whole time, you're probably a bit flat. But I think there's probably better options that are a bit more reliable, and I would consider selling. Into the front row, and again, we're not going to muck around with too many cheap options here. Mitch Barnett at the top of the list this week with the 54 starting in the front row. He has reverted to the bench this week, so I think the ship might have sailed on that pick. Ideally, it was 2 weeks ago if you could foresee the 120. Perhaps last week if you wanted to take advantage of the price rise. The big one's done now, so I think, if you've got him, you can hold him. If you don't, there's no stress. You're not missing out on much there. TPJ, so he's bottomed out in price now. So if you want to take the ultimate risk at 400k, if you have someone like Harry Edwards, that's only about 10k trade to a potential upside type player. But I think that's really squeezing the budget there. I should have put the squeeze the budget one there too, but I don't think he's going to get any cheaper than that. So if you want him, now's the time to get him. Joey Tarpany, so I guess a real safe keeper option. 640k, averaging 66 for the year. Dual position, they're all big ticks in my book. Lots of people have him in the side. I can't blame any of them. Fanua Blake, so another massive game from him, 122. And I guess now with Tino missing for a few weeks, he does become, a prime target for your starting front row. So if you did want to make that trade, Tino to Fanua Blake, I would not begrudge you that at all. Make 150k and obviously get some good points with that too. Obviously this week you will miss out next week with the bye, so again, weigh all that up when you're making your trade decisions. Corey Horsburgh, so a bit of a point of difference, I think, at 650k. He's a bit more expensive, but he has been doing the business this season. Yeah, I think if you've got Tarpany, they're the same sort of player, so I think you have one or the other. And then after that, you diversify in terms of the teams. Although the Raiders don't have another bye, so they will both play the rest of the season, you'd imagine. But yeah, that's up to you. Nelson is soft for Solomona, so 580k, scored 49 on the weekend, playing that wide running second row option. So, a nice point of difference if you're that way inclined. Obviously, lining up against the potential smaller bodies out on that edge, he could be every chance of getting a try. Um, well, most weeks. Jack DeBellin, so another point of difference option who's been real solid rather than spectacular. Um, I'd personally go for a bit more upside, but I can't say too much considering I've got the next player, which is Tohu Harris. So yeah, sort of very similar. I don't know what happened with Tohu on the weekend, only getting 38. That'd be about his lowest for the season. Um, but yeah, I guess you look at Jack DeBell and he's about 70k or 65k cheaper for a few points less per week. So it depends on budget, whatnot. But again, Tohu is very well owned as well. So he's got the keeper symbol there too. Payne Haas didn't play last week, back from his ankle injury that kept him out of Origin. He's a gun. Um, probably a front row forward one, averaging for the rest of the season. Um, does miss out 1 week as well. So, if Noah Blake's the same, Tohu's the same. So I think, you can afford to carry one or two of those guys and be okay. Ruben Cotter, so I guess 35, again, backing up from Origin. Um, so I think, if you are looking to again, squeeze the budget, tight budget, um, Ruben Cotter could be a way to free up cash for other positions. And then at the bottom of the list, we've got Big Tino. So unfortunately, he's got himself suspended for 3 weeks for a shoulder charge. Um, the logic says that, he's so much more expensive than every other front rower. His break even's massive. The numbers point to chopping him. I think that the argument I would make against that is if you're purely a head to head player, um, you may want to wait because he misses out obviously the next 3 weeks, which will get you through to the first week of your final. So if you've already safely qualified for finals, you can cover him in that round 23 match. He's going to become a really nice point of difference for your team going into the rest of the final. So particularly if you're top four, you can't afford to even slip up that week, and then you get Tino back in for the last 3 rounds of the head-to-head season. That is. So yeah, if you're looking just to get overall, I think you've got to chop him. It's too much money sitting on the bench for 3 weeks. You get someone like Fanua Blake, even though he's got a bye. You'd suggest across the rest of the season, Fanua Blake outscores Tino just because he's going to play 2 extra games. Um, yeah, so for that reason, I think it depends on your situation. If you're an overall player, I think he goes. If you're a head-to-head player, um, I think he stays. So on to the second rowers, and we'll look at the more premium options, so those 550k and above. So obviously a lot of our final team type players here. And at the top of the list, we've got Jeremiah Nanai. So 68 on the weekend. A 3 round average of 86 is, I guess, what we're looking at if you're looking to pick someone like Nanai as you're hoping for that upside that he is capable of. He does, find his way to a try quite a bit. Um, it's high risk, high reward, but this is the time of year to start making those picks. So, really good point of difference option, I think, for the back end of the season. John Bateman, we know what he's capable of, even though the Tigers aren't going to flash. He'll still put in 1,000% every week. So, again, another point of difference option if you want. Nikora, so 99 in a comprehensively beaten side. That's why he's a gun. Big tick there. I think after Fafita, he is the second sort of target that you should have for the run home. Hudson Young, I've got on the list just due to his average being there or thereabouts. It's a bit of I guess, a pass from me bit of a NDHP sort of situation with him. He's a bit of an angry ant, and I don't need that at my side. So could be a nice point of difference, but not for everyone. The Cardi Party, so I suggested it was over last week, but he's kept it raging with a 96 on the weekend. It looks like he's locked in that left edge. I think he plays. Can't think now. No, right edge. One of the edges. They've got Sean Lane on the other edge, obviously, and they're playing Madison off the bench as a middle. So yeah, if you wanted to hold for the rest of the season, that's perfectly okay. But yeah, if you wanted to sideways, or you can potentially upgrade from there. I don't think that's the worst idea either. Nat Butcher, so 48 probably isn't quite where he's been lately, but a season average of 63 suggests that he's a nice point of difference option. Olaquatu, a bit in the Jeremiah Nanai category of high risk, high reward type pick. If you like Manly on the run home, personally, I think they've got a bit of a tough draw, so I'd be looking elsewhere. But I can totally understand people getting on board. Pat Carrigan, so rested last week, but he'll be back this week. Um, the average of 63, 3 round average of 63 sort of suggests what you're getting there. It's solid base. It's a bit elevated on the types like Josh King, those sort of people, which is why they're not featuring this week in the stock market video. So I think out of those, solid base type players, Carrigan is the elite option out of those. But again, my appetite is for the slightly more upside, bit of risk, bit of reward sort of deal. One of which being Kaloa Matangi. So didn't play because of the bye last week for South. But coming back from Origin, you think he'd be in for a massive run in the back half of the season. So averaging 67 for the season, I think he's good. You could wait a week, break even of 89, but I wouldn't try to overthink it, if you want him, bring him in. Isaiah Yo, so talk about Origin and resting. He'll be back this week, averaging 67 as well for the season. He's a proven gun, so if you wanted to bring him in, I would not begrudge anyone of that. Dave Fafita, 60 on the weekend. Looked a bit flat towards the back end of it, but he's a tank, still averaging 86 for the season. And with Tino out, you'd expect he'll take a bit more of a prominent role in the Titans forward pack. At least that's what we hope for anyway. Jermaine Hopgood, 61, he just keeps churning out points. So, he's got a bit of a high break even, but there's no bad time to bring him in. So in terms of the more budget options that we've got this week, Lockie Fitzgibbon's at the top of the list. 54 last week, so still got a 3 round average of 72, negative break even. So, if you are looking for a cheaper option, you could go with Fitzgibbon. So I don't know, I just got distracted by Cam Murray's symbol there. That's not correct. I don't know what I've done there. But yeah, I guess with an average of 58, break even of 19, it should actually be the bottom symbol. I don't know what's happened there. But, I think if you said at the start of the year you could get Murray for under 500k, you'd absolutely take that. I know he was a bit flat through the first half of the year. I think there was a bit of injury and whatnot. But he's looked good in Origin. He'll obviously come back confident after the win. And, it could be a really nice point of difference for the run home. Dan Russell, so he's played one game and is named to start on the edge again for the Dragons this week. Jack Bird is lurking on the bench though, so I think, if you are looking for a bottom dollar player playing this week, it is an option. Whether it's the best option, I don't know. I'd wait and see, see if he can establish himself in that position. Liam Martin, so I guess, missed last week being rested after Origin, but sub 500k, we know he's capable of finding the try line. And and given Penrith's overall attacking ability, especially now Nathan Cleary is back, you could do a lot worse than pick him. Uh, Jesse Colquhoun from the Sharks, so on the bubble this week, but has been named on the edge with Teague Wilton's injury. So a really interesting one, I guess, if you're looking for a, he's not quite bottom dollar, but a super cheap cash out option. Um, he might be the guy. He is dual position as well, which is handy. I'm pretty sure he is anyway. Double guessing myself now. But yeah, if you can afford to wait a week and see how he goes, that's okay. But as I said, the general theme of the stock market now is we're really just looking to target these guns or potential pods that we want. We don't need to be finessing too much in terms of making cash. You should have, been working on that through the first half of the year. So, it's really now guns and nuffs, I suppose, is the strategy that we should be targeting. But again, for those that are a bit strapped on cash, need a playing player, could be a good option. Cleese Haas looks like he has one edge spot. Joe Stimson has been named on the bench. He was the one we were worried about coming back in. And that may still be the case. But I guess if you're looking for a starting second rower that will play fairly big minutes, with a chance of upside, he might be the pick. Jackson Ford, so got 63 on the weekend, and that's sort of his MO, was just real solid base. Will occasionally find the try line. So I've got the bench symbol there. I think he's one you can park on your bench as your 19th, 20th sort of player in your squad. And then in case of emergencies, so say like Big Tino's missing for a few weeks, you can plug and play forward with a bit of confidence that at least you'll get a half decent score. Jacob Preston, sort of in the similar category as Ford. I guess 81 last week shows that he has that bit more of attacking upside. So I haven't got him as a gun option, but definitely as a solid keeper. I think he's still very highly owned. Um, yeah, I did sell to sort of make some moves elsewhere. Don't regret it mostly, but I would love to have him in the squad. Ryan Madison, so as we said, he's coming off the bench playing in the middle. Um, he's still averaging that 64, even though a lot of his games are off the bench, so don't let that sway you. The 3 round average might be a bit of a concern though, but particularly given Campbell Gillard's out for a few weeks now, you'd expect that Madison will pick up in terms of minutes, and then obviously as a consequence his Supercoach output. Teague Wilton, so a knee injury. It's not quite known yet how long that is, but I think, given there's a lot of great options around the price point, I think we get out of the pick at this point. Onto the halfbacks, and at the top of the list this week is Phoenix Crossland. So I have folded a few of the 5'8 dual position guys back in to this, just again to sort of space the positions out and the options a bit better. So Crossland, 68 last week, 3 round average is 74. Probably again when we talk about these dual position guys, we're probably looking more in the 5'8 slot than halfback. But he's proven to be a nice point of difference. That solid base sort of 5'8 option, which is a bit rare, I suppose. Given the volatility that outside backs have in their scoring. Adam Reynolds, so 112 on the weekend, gives people a bit of hope as, oh, this could be a cheap option. He's a trap. We've said it all year. That messaging is not going to change, despite the good score. He was playing the Bulldogs, so it's a bit deprecating to the team that I support, but yeah, most halfbacks could score well against them at the moment. SJ, 135 on the weekend. I guess the Warriors were just so dominant and he was involved in everything. So, until that effort last week, it was always going to be all right. Next week he's going to get traded out for Cleary. Super simple, smartest trade in the game. Um, I guess again, this is one of those ones. If you're playing head to head, I'd almost lean towards keeping SJ. And the reason being, while the next 2 weeks is probably more advantageous to have Cleary, after that, I think the Warriors draw is as good as any team in the comp. And obviously, SJ is going to be a big part of that. So, yeah, again, it's one of those ones. I think, you can go either way with it. If you're playing overall, I'd do the trade. I think, if we look across the next, the last 6, 7 weeks, as a single block, Cleary probably will outscore SJ. But during those head-to-head finals, SJ could be that differential if everyone else is getting on Cleary. So yeah, it's a tricky one. But yeah, I think he's a really great point of difference, particularly for head-to-head players. Matt Burton, so 44 on the weekend, perhaps limited after Sexton went off. And against the Panthers this week, not going to suggest he's going to get a lot of attacking stats. Um, he'll obviously be fired up to play against the former team, but um, yeah, just the way they line up with Flanagan at halfback, it's a bit of a concern. He may just slot in and sort of follow Toby Sexton's lead, um, but yeah, I think he's still a nice point of difference at the 5'8" position. Sexton is only out for 1 week, hopefully with the HIA. But yeah, I wouldn't be playing him in your 17 this week. Jack Cogger, he's done a great job for those who had him. A couple of 100K in cash, scoring some consistent points. But with Cleary back, obviously it's time for him to go. Sandon Smith, so 23 on the weekend. Sort of seen his price peak, I think, at this point. So, if you can do something with the bit of money he's made, which is almost, close to 200K, I would. Um, but yeah, I guess given he's so cheap, you may get a little bit stuck unless you have a plan around that. Toby Sexton, 42 in the first half before getting the HIA. So, if you sort of extrapolate that score out, not to say that, the Broncos wouldn't have done much different in the second half, but he definitely has sparked the attack of the Dogs. They scored 3 tries in the first half there quite easily. Or not easily, but, they're actually making things happen. So, you know, whether he's good enough to replace the sort of big four, I wouldn't have thought so, but he's that cheaper option that I would have sort of banked on if I was that way inclined. But obviously not this week. Mitchell Moses, so 41 on the weekend. It's I guess when you compare it to SJ, it's like, well, he's probably dropped down to fourth on the list if he wasn't already in terms of halfback options. But I can see why people would have him as a point of difference. Nathan Cleary, he's back this week. I might be a bit over exuberant there with the best buy, but he's been the best player in the game for a while. Averaging 83. If you can have that in your side, and as I said, this week against the Dogs, he could go massive. Like that break even of 129 is not safe. So, if you're playing overall, he is the best buy. If you're playing head to head, you may need to consider it a little bit more. Nico Hines, so in a well beaten side last week, he still scored 72. He's still averaging 100 for the season. So, he's a tank. Even in those games where the Sharks haven't been doing so well against the top sides, he's still scoring points. So I see some people trading Cleary for Hines. It's a bold move, I'll admit, but not one that I would suggest doing. Onto the 5'8", and at the top of the list, Kalen Ponga. And He's earned himself gun status. Look at the numbers: 137 last week, averaging 78 for the season, and that includes the time where he was actually playing 5'8" at the start of the season. 3 round average of 121. You know, and you can play him at fullback too if you want. So I've sort of had him as the 5'8" pod. Obviously now he's a gun, so I don't think it's too poddish anymore. But there is an argument to push him to fullback, given a couple of the guys are really expensively priced, and a couple of the other guys have buys at inconvenient times. Ponga's going to play every game for the rest of the year. So yeah, I think if you are trying to target someone that is a bit of money, you look at Drinkwater, you look at Gutherson. I think Ponga is the number one target. If you have to, try to get a big money player in, that is the one I'd prioritise. At the other end of the scale, Amone is 292k, negative break even. Um, Jaden Sullivan's out of the picture now, so you'd assume that he's going to play 80 minutes. The only downside is that he plays for the Dragons, who haven't obviously been the most attacking this season. And also, he can be a bit of a roller coaster pick. But, if the budget sort of dictates that that's all you can afford as your second 5'8" backup option, so be it. Luke Metcalf, 52 again on the weekend, so he's ticking along nicely. You know, all the hype pre-season was justified, but I think the ship sailed on that pick. He's going to have the bye next week, and then his break even will sort of even out with his average. So yeah, not much value in that pick. I think you've really got to go a gun, or you may have to drop down to someone like an Amone if need be. Tom Dearden, 54 on the weekend, still has a nice break even. The 3 round average will start to dip in the coming weeks, so a nice point of difference if you can afford him. But at that money, I'd just pay the extra 20k and get Kalen Ponga in. Joey Manu, 79 on the weekend, playing fullback. Um, his break even is sort of at the place where he's peaked in price, but he does offer dual position. He does offer that upside even when he is playing centre. If he was playing 5'8" or fullback, we'd be a lot more confident in his scoring ability. But, I guess as a squad player can be very handy for the run home. Dejan Arce had a bit of a mare on Sunday, scoring a 9. So obviously we need to get out of that. We don't need scores like that stinking up our auto emergency or even our starting 17. So find a way to get out of that pick if you got on. Cam Munster, 65 on the weekend, backing up from Origin. So he will dip in price, but he's a gun, so I don't think you need to wait. And Cody Walker, so 730k for him. Again, he will dip in price. He could wait. Does have a buy coming up as well, so I can see why people would fade Cody Walker, but then also Souths do have some nice games coming up too. So I've gone back to having 3 guns in a position that only has 2 slots, but they're a bit hard to separate. Like I said, if you wanted to, you could move Ponga to fullback, run with Munster and Cody at 5'8". I don't think that's the silliest shout at the moment, particularly if you can't afford those premium fullback options. Onto the centre wings, so got some premium options here, 600k and above. And at the top of the list, I've got Isaac Targo. So just realised I was going to put the Superman symbol here too. I think he is a massive point of difference for the back end of the season. He's only in about 3% of teams. As I've talked about, plays the Dogs this week. He's already got a 3 round average of 98. That's going to probably be higher after this week. I'm calling it early. But yeah, here's one I'm seriously considering bringing into my team. as a centre wing that can give me that advantage in the head-to-head finals. Greg Marzu, 102 on the weekend, pushing his average up to 80. Absolute gun. Playing on the left wing outside of Callum Ponga, it would be pretty easy to score 80. So yeah, I think here's the one of the other ones to absolutely target if you don't already have him for the run home. Campbell Graham, so had the bye last week, um, averaging well for the season. I guess the the thing we probably should talk about this too. Now that I've mentioned a few South players and they're good options. Your Cooks, Clyde your Cody Walkers, obviously the Trells coming up. Round 26 is for most people a head-to-head grand final. So that's when South have their their third bye, I should say. So if you're loading up on South players, you're potentially going to be stuck with them sitting on your bench for the head-to-head final. Um, I just would warn against over capitalising on South players. Obviously, if you have two, you can easily trade them out, assuming you've got trades left. But yeah, you don't want to get too stuck with South players on the bench. If you're playing overall, you might not care about that, in which case go nuts. Like we said, South have a pretty decent draw. They've always been known as quite an attacking side, which is great for SuperCoach. Um, but yeah, just want to temper sort of expectations around that. DWZ 95 on the weekend. He's still pumping out scores, so I think and given the Warriors' form as well, we sort of have to say that he is a valid point of difference for the run home. Val Holmes, 3 round average of 100, scored 93 on the weekend, backing up from Origin. The way the Cowboys are going at the moment, he's a gun. You could confidently play him every week, and expect decent returns. Sifa Talakai, so 26 on the weekend, and as a consequence has been demoted to the bench for this week. Fitzy's shaking up the side a little bit after they're trying to inspire a bit more solid defence, I think, out of the team. Him and Moylan were guilty on the edge of letting a few through. So if you've got him, I think you chop him. Same sort of deal for players like Ronaldo, Mulatalo, Jesse Ramian, those sort of guys. I think they're just proving that they're a bit too inconsistent. And now that they've done their job of playing through those last couple of bye rounds, big bye rounds, I should say, it's time to upgrade those to more or higher probability assets in your team. Dan Gagai, so someone that's averaging 70 deserves a bit of respect as a point of difference, but yeah, not really for me. I think that's just not an exciting pick, but you know, again, he could be the one that wins your head-to-head final. CNK 92 on the weekend. Just he did score a try, but just so much work rate. Love to see it. He's averaging 69 now, which is obviously a big bump from where he was earlier in the season. So I've put the pot on him. I think he's a keeper. He's well owned. And people are just going to hold him till the rest of the year. Brian Toto, I guess another Penrith player coming off Origin, playing the Dogs this week, could do bits. Stephen Crichton might not feed him enough ball, to be fair. But yeah, really nice point of difference. He's not that highly owned, but we know what he's capable of in terms of runs, tackle breaks, all that good stuff. Ruben Garrick, so he scored 50 on the weekend. I've talked about I'm not a big fan of Manly's run home, but a goal kicking fullback who's averaging 70 for the season, you've got to give him the gun symbol. Yeah, he might not outscore some of these other guys, but he'll score plenty good enough. On to the mid-range options, and so at the top of the list is Ravalawa from the Dragons. Um, So coming off the bye and his big score a couple of weeks ago means he's got a negative break even. Um, if you want to grab some last bit of cash, you may want to go with Ravalama. But yeah, again, like I said, those sort of picks I think we're done with, or most of us are done with for the season. Jake Avarillo, so scored 70 on the weekend. Um, when you put that in context of he scored 2 tries, it doesn't sound as great. And obviously, again, playing Penrith this week, the attacking upside is limited. But if you can hold him on the bench this week, I think he becomes a really nice point of difference for the run home because he has looked good at fullback, and I can't see the Dogs shifting all the back line again. Timoko is a decent point of difference. He scored well at the start of the year, 3-round average of 73 currently. So again, he could be that point of difference that wins you a head-to-head in the coming weeks. And obviously, free of the buys is nice as well. Jacob Carraz, so 72 on the weekend, back to his best with ball running, offloading, tackle breaking. That's why we wanted to bring him in a couple of weeks ago when his price had bottomed out. He's like a budget version of Brian Tyler, essentially. So even though he's playing in the centres, he's still getting through the work, which is what we like to see. Sammy Valame, so another 40. So he's continuing the sort of streak of hundreds and tens and 40s. May mean he's up for 110 this week. But yeah, if you want to ride the roller coaster, you can. I wouldn't recommend getting on at this point, though. Lemuelu, so 77 on the weekend, including a really nice solo effort. Little kick and chase for himself and a bit of meat. Looks like he's back playing on the edge, big minutes. When he reverted to the bench, got off, and I was included in that. But now regretting. He's a really handy option. Dual position as well, which is nice for teams that are low on trades. But obviously has the bye this week, so don't trade him in this week if you do want to bring him in for the run home. Valence Stafaro, so did get a game on the wing last week. Don't know if he's suited to that position. He's definitely built like at least a centre. But 26 was still some points on the board for some people. But he's on the bye this week. Yeah, if you need to use his money to fund other trades, go for it. I don't know if he's really worth holding, but could be useful 20th, 21st player in this squad if that's what it takes. Nick Meaney with the 72 on the weekend. So I guess the average just under 70 puts him out of the gun sort of status. But goal kicking fullback again is a big tick. So really nice point of difference if you do have him for the run home. Alex Johnston. So I think, off the back of his 21 a couple of weeks ago, had the bye. He's still got another bye coming. We talked about South players and the head-to-head finals. So, unless you really think he's just going to go on an absolute tear, I think it's time to chop him. Yeah, there's just much more consistent options and bankable options, I suppose, than AJ. The Hammer, 48 on the weekend, but with the bye, high break even, not playing fullback, I'd consider getting rid of him. Jack Bird is named on the bench this week, so again, probably not an immediate trade in, but one to consider if you want that sort of DPP option that can fill in both spots. Probably would be predicated on him getting his starting spot back. And Jermaine Asako, 35 on the weekend, averages 74. The Dolphins have a up and down run on the way home. So I think if you wanted to use his money now, you could. If you wanted to hold him because he kicks goals and, hopefully the Dolphins have a few easy games in attack, you could also too. He's done the job all season. There's no reason why he can't continue to do that. Excuse me. Onto the cheaper options in the centre wing, so less than 400k. Blake Wilson at the top of the list for the Dogs. So has sort of earned a spot on the wing. And 22 wasn't the return we wanted. But I don't think you have to panic trade. He probably will have a fairly low score again this week, let's be honest, against Penrith. But with a negative 24 break even, he'll still make some money. And then next week we can reassess where we're at. But yeah, I wouldn't at this stage get off the Wilson pick if you have got him, just because of one low effort. Rocco Berry, so 92 probably came a bit late for when we wanted to pick him. I did say to cut him last week, and there's a couple of those calls that have backfired on me this week. But 350k negative break even, and he's a tough run of the ball, so he is always prone to tackle breaks and tries and line breaks. So if you've got a real tight budget and you need a cheap centre wing, he's probably my pick out of the lot, because of that little bit of upside. The Warriors are playing well too, so that always helps. Tommy Talau, so again, another sort of roller coaster type pick. 34, so he's averaging 27 for the year. I know some of those scores were substitute affected, but yeah, it's a bit too variable for my liking. Will Skelton, no, I keep saying Will, Jarrell Skelton, 40, he is named on the wing again this week, so he is on the bubble, but Addo Carr is named in the extended reserve. So I think if you're looking for a bottom dollar cheapie that's playing this week, here's the pick, but it's not a fantastic pick by any stretch. And Billy Smith scored 70 last week, so I think there's no value in trading him in. Obviously, if you've got him, you just hold because he's going to make a bit more cash. Looks like he's pretty locked in on that centre spot there at the Roosters, so yeah, no need to panic on him. And finally, the fullbacks. So Blake Taff at the top of the list this week, coming off the bye, but is named on the bench with Latrell coming back. So got the axe symbol on him. It's a bit tough because, as you can see, all the other options are quite expensive, comparatively speaking. But I think you need to have two gun fullbacks for the run home. Dream Buller, so with Happy Coruscant coming back, return to fortune for him with 79. So, for those that held, I think that's, not the worst shout. He could be a really nice point of difference for the run home. And particularly at the price, it's a lot easier to get to him than some of the other options. Reece Walsh, so back from his suspension this week. At 630k, I think he actually represents quite good value. So I went early on Tedesco last week. And while I don't exactly regret that, I think in hindsight, if I was going for a bit more upside, I could have actually gone with Reece Walsh. And, he doesn't play round 25, which is the head to head preliminary finals. It's not ideal, but yeah, if I can cover that with other positions and whatnot, then, he might be one worth holding because then in the grand final, he could definitely do a bit for us. So, you know, like him as a pick, um, currently tossing up between him and Latrell for who I bring in as my second fullback. Scott Drinkwater, obviously, if you can afford him, he is again, this should have been a super pod. I forgot to add the super. Him and Tago are the two big sort of point of difference options, I think. 86 on the weekend, 3 round average of 133. It's pretty disrespectful not to have the gun symbol there. But I guess it's, there's so many good players in this position. And he's so low owned that he really is that super pod. Dylan Edwards, 68 last week. The average is a bit lower than some of these other options, but with Cleary back, and we've seen he can do it in the past. He is that sort of high risk, high reward pick for the last 6 weeks of the season that you can, potentially win some stuff on. Tedesco got rested last week, so hopefully he's back fit and firing. At least that's what I'm hoping as an owner. So yeah, his average has been a bit down, but with the Roosters' season essentially on the line at the moment, you'd really expect him to lift, and even if he can't get the team across the line, he'll still get heavily involved, and SuperCoach will reward us with some points. Gutho, 61 on the weekend, so he's doing all right. Again, 900 is a lot of money. Um, yeah, I think there's better options than him in terms of value, but with an average of 79, you can't begrudge people who have him in the side. And finally, Latrell. So we've been talking about it for a while. He's finally back this week. Goal kicking fullback is a big tick. That's why he has the gun symbol next to him. It's a point of difference to the other players in the team. Um, as we've talked about, don't overcapitalise on South players um, for head to head. But in terms of the run home, I think Latrell is a great option. So I guess to summarise in terms of buy, keep, sell, and avoid, the buys this week I've got buy Cleary, buy Latrell. They're probably my favourite options in those positions. Um, in saying that, if you are a head-to-head play, you might want to consider those a little bit more. On the keeps, so like I said, a few people looking to trade out Nico Hines to bring in Cleary. I think keep Hines. He's just proven that he's far and away one of the best Supercoach players in the comp. So you're just throwing points away at this point if you do that. And if you're a head-to-head player, I'd recommend keeping Tino. I'll be honest, I was sort of struggling for for keeps and sells, so I have sort of taken 2 bites of the same cherry there. On the sell list, I think if you're an overall player, you sell Tino, use the money elsewhere to strengthen the rest of the squad. And if you've got someone like Teague Wilton who's out for an indeterminate amount of time, you sell him too. On the avoids, again, I didn't talk about a lot of avoid type options, so we'll go with Adam Reynolds as always as a bit of a trap, but also any of those low upside options. This is the time of year where you can take a bit of a risk. It's not going to impact you long term, but obviously, it's that risk and reward sort of deal that you need to make with yourself. So yeah, so that's why again some of the players that are fairly popular, like Josh King, is a prime example. I left him off the list just because he'll bang out 55, 60 every week, but he had one score of 100, and I think that's really about it. So um, yeah, so as much as possible, look for those players that obviously have a decent floor, but also that nice bit of upside. All right, and that concludes the stock market for round 21. As always, if you've got any thoughts or players that I've missed that you think are clearly worth considering for our end of season teams, feel free to throw them in the comments below. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe to the video and the channel respectively. Other than that, I'll catch you in the next one.